Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy, sir, how are you? Good evening to you, sir. Hello.
I am good.
Are you sure?
It's the end of my work week.
I am good,
It hasn't
sir.
snowed yet, though.
Thank you for coming.
Snow.
Have you brought up the website? Is it snowing in Dunedin yet?
I was told that there was snow. The news was panicking. It hasn't happened.
Tonight's overnight low, I believe, is 1. Tomorrow's overnight low is -2. That's what I've read in the weather forecast. So maybe it'll be in the middle of the night. Maybe you'll wake up to it. End of your work week. That's no good, though, because you want to have it to snow on a work day. So you can have a snow day. Isn't that always better?
I don't care as long as I just want to make a snowman.
And you want to take your snow dog into the snow.
Nice big snowdrift and just go.
All right, let us get into a conversation about several things. Tonight we're going to have a look at the Guardian poll. I don't know why Guardian's doing polls. We're going to have a look at it and see what the trends are within that poll for the political cycle at the moment. We have a really interesting story about Karen Plunket because, if you've seen the write-up of the show, you already know what's going on. But there was a really, is it funny, Chewy? I don't know. Interesting moment in Karen's show.
Is it funny? There's lots of different types of funny.
Funny looking.
How jovial, or that's fucking weird funny.
Yeah. Just so people know, I was talking to my camera guy today, Jason, and I think the situation is my battery's fucked. So even though my thing is plugged in, it's not giving enough charge to keep it on board. So I'm going to buy a new battery. So put up with it, folks. I'm sorry. It's probably going to cut in and out tonight. You know, I don't go anywhere. And, you know, we're supporting the rainbow community. Is that right, Chewy? Can we say that? I don't know. Something like that. And anyway, amplifying counterspin talking points. And I think he was a bit shocked when he realized what he was doing. It's really weird, Chewy, how like some sort of reactionary media outlet, would want to have sort of no research done on a guest to figure out who they are and what they're about before they actually put them on air. And then once they're on air live, realize, I don't know if we want to put this out there. And then said media outlet would still choose to make that as a clip and put it on the internet to highlight their show. So bizarre.
It's shambolic. Like even we can manage to do a little bit of research on a guest and make sure that they're not associated with something that we don't agree with.
Yeah.
Or even if they are, just to make sure that we know what they're going to talk about.
Well, we're all about baby eaters, aren't we, on the left? Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that what we're about? I think so.
It's just a different type of veal.
Too wrong. Hey, before we go, I wanted to show you. Now, I was going to say one of the cutest videos I've seen this week. It's a little bit patronizing to say that. But we all know Jason Momoa. He has a absolute, I was going to say hard on for New Zealand. That feels so wrong. He has a love for New Zealand, like not many other kind of international stars. He's in New Zealand at the moment filming something. If people are All Blacks fans, they would have seen him at the All Blacks game on the weekend. They showed him on the sideline. I don't know how he got on the sideline. Well, because he's Aquaman. He probably swum to the sideline up the Leith River or something. And he was with one of our All Black legends, Tana Umanga, today. And I wanted to show you this clip off his Instagram before we get to our first guest, because it's delightful. There isn't too often, I think, Chewy, that you'd see someone who could afford anything. You know, someone like, how do you buy something for a gift for someone who doesn't need anything and can purchase everything? Well, he was out with Tana today. They were getting shirts, and he says in his little write up there that he wanted to give something to Tana Umanga, and Tana Umanga gave something to him. And I just want you to watch the reaction of Jason Momoa when Tana gives him the gift back again. It's delightful. It's delightful.
Solid, right? That looks as good as you, but also which one look better? Like this color or like that color? That looks pretty sick. Yeah, and then you got the all black. Necessary.
Just bro stuff.
now that we're exchanging things, I've got an old jersey of mine that's been sitting around. In Scotland in it.
Holy shit, man. Wow. Dude, what year is this? Because that's the one that has like all the...
Yeah, no, that's in, I think, 99, 2000. Wow.
We're really doing it for the Aquaman porn. That's really the only reason we're showing it. For the ladies.
How we please a certain demographic.
Yeah, I seen you've got a black one, so I thought I'll give you a white one.
It's pretty cute, eh?
I've never seen one of these up close.
Yeah, it's one of the funny ones.
He just seems to be living his best life.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, like, you know, a man who can buy anything. I mean, that's get given a obviously game used jersey by Tana Umaga, and you can see the reaction. It's genuine. It's authentic. It's utterly delightful. So,
speaking of Justin Momoa, or Jason Momoa, I should say. Have you seen the latest Fast and Furious movie?
I have not.
It is dreadful.
Good.
But literally the only person that looks like he's having a good time in that movie is Jason Momoa.
He looks like he's always having a good time.
He's amazing in it.
Yeah.
It's a shame it's such a dreadful film.
All right, let's get moving because we have got Tracy in the waiting room and we're talking too long. We don't want to tangent now. Tracy Clelland, Dr. Tracy Clelland is an adjunct lecturer, in the School of Health Sciences from the University of Canterbury. Tracy joins us all the way from China. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, doing very well. Did you enjoy the Jason Momoa clip like the rest of us did?
I did, actually. And once we get talking in our conversation, I'll make some cool points about it, actually.
Oh, okay. Very, very good. Now, listen, Tracy, the reason we've got you on is you have written a piece that I think went up into the conversation today titled Ignore the Politics, Many Parents Want to Work with Schools on Sexuality Education. This is really, I don't know if you're writing it based around this or more about your research and what Nicola Willis said is sort of a sort of a byproduct for you to get into your conversation. But to read a paragraph or two from here before we throw you the ball, National Party Deputy Leader Nicola Willis recently told a public meeting that sex education was a job for her and her husband. Quote, based on our values and our views of the world, I want my education system focused on teaching my children how to read, how to write, how to do maths, end quote. While Willis may have had a receptive audience, interviews with parents of children aged between 11 and 14 show she may be in the minority. Now, I'm a parent of a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, but 14-year-old and 17-year-old who are still at school, both girls. And this is a conversation which interests me greatly. But I think to start with, like we'd love to do here, we're just going to throw you the ball, Tracy, and let you pick up where I've left off. Tell us about the article, tell us about your research, and tell us why perhaps Nicola Willis might not have it as right as many parents would like us to believe.
Right, well, the question is, where do you start?
At the beginning.
Can I tell you a little bit about myself first? Because I
Please
think
do.
that gives a bit of context. And as I said to you, Pat, what I like is we don't have to rush because it is a complicated topic. We know that, right? So first of all, I'm a researcher and I'm also a teacher and I'm a sexuality educator and I've got 2 teenage sons. Okay. So I've got what are they now? 18 and 19. And they've had a mother who's a sexuality educator for their whole lifetime.
Good Lord.
I know. And it's funny because you just said you had a 19-year-old as well, Pat?
Yep.
Now, I don't know what kind of conversations you have with your 19-year-old, but my son who's 19, we have the most awesome conversations about the world. And when I'm talking about the world, I'm talking about how the world is, gendered, their sexuality, what's expected of young boys, all those kind of things. That is relationships and sexuality education. But that was built from conversations from when my children were born, and that's what we seem to forget. It's the conversations I'm having with him, but then he is going out to the world every day and learning about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what's expected. And your clip was around, you talked about hard-on, porn, the Fast and Furious movies. Now, all those movies are full of gendered messages, right? And young people are making sense of it every single day from the minute that they're born, right? And when Nicola says that, sexuality education or sex education, so we've got to get to that in a moment, all right?
Yeah, because it's changed.
Education.
Changed from when I was at school. Yeah.
Yeah. So sex education by parents. Yes, of course, parents are important. It's a shared conversation. And young people have told us they want to hear their parents' values, but they also want to hear other people's values. They're trying to make sense of this world, right? And what we forget with her comment is there's a lot of parents from my research, young people have said their parents don't say anything, or it's very negative messages. And I'll give you an example. One young person said, oh, we so need this stuff because, my dad just winds down the window and says, oh, you're pretty hot. Would you like my son's phone number?
Yikes.
And that's a 14-year-old boy, right? 14. And so the reason I'm telling you that is that sets the scene. So I've been in this space for 30 years now. I started off as a family planning educator because I was really passionate about well-being, all right? Not just about sex, because it is relationships and sexuality education. And I know I'm going to talk lots because that's what I do, because I'm really passionate about this. And one of the things I say to my students is, sex doesn't occur between bodies, it occurs between people.
Right.
Right. And you know how hard relationships are. They take work. And that's what relationships and sexuality education is. All right. So what I'm trying to say is it's complicated. You've got schools and how they're teaching. You've got parents and what they're doing. And then you've got young people making sense of the world. So my research crosses across all areas. We've been working with teachers. I've been interviewing young people. And I've also been interviewing parents. So where do you want me to start?
Do you see a disparity between what the young people want, what the parents want, and what the teachers want?
Yeah, totally. Teachers are probably much more in line with what young people want. Okay. Parents are shifting that way. Now, I have to be careful here because when you look at the media and we have people like Nicola saying, parents don't want this or this is her job, Australian research and New Zealand research has shown that over 90% of parents in New Zealand actually do want some form of relationships and sexuality education. All right.
So that's a minority position that she's holding.
Yes, it is, but it's a very loud voice, as you know.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are things we need to consider. So schools can always do better, parents can do better. But young people we interviewed over our the last 6 months to a year, they basically told us, look, we're not getting what we need. We've got the whole issue of pornography, gender norms, changing families, diverse sexualities, and we need to talk about this stuff because otherwise we have no one. And I have to give you some quotes because quotes to me tell you what's going on for young people.
For sure.
We asked this young boy who was 13, he was 14, and he said, well, we asked him, how do you learn about relationships and sexuality education? He goes, look, it's like Nike says, you just do it. And you imagine if I told that to a parent about, we're going to teach your child to drive, just get in and have a go.
Yeah.
Right? People would be like, ah. And I often, when I'm teaching, I talk about relationships and sexuality is like learning to drive. You learn the skills as you go and you need some guidance along the way. So if parents are the only people who do it, what messages are they getting? They're getting one view, right? Whereas they need to understand that there is diverse ways of being. Not everyone likes the same person. Not everyone wants to be the same. We want a society that's tolerant and open, or we end up like America, where we actually start abolishing rights for people, and that scares me. So, yeah, young people said they were feeling like they were being left to their own devices. That's the words they use, their devices being their phones. It's how they learn.
Isn't that ironic? That's not just a metaphor anymore. It's actual literal as well, being left to their own devices. Yeah. Shelley, you got anything, mate?
Yeah, just reading through the article, there's one thing that really jumped out at me is that sex and health education really kicked off in the 80s. So, I obviously had the benefit of that going through schools, obviously pretty early version of it. But it would seem to me that the parents of, people of my generation that are having kids are the first generation of kids that have had a more cohesive sex education upbringing.
Yeah.
Whereas beforehand, yeah, it was down to a very embarrassing birds and the bees conversation with Dad, probably over some duck shooting down here,
Or it didn't
or going
happen.
out to a farm and going, yeah, like that, but with people. And I think, I'm sure the stats bear this out, that we've seen the benefits in society overall, like teen pregnancy has dropped. Sexually transmitted diseases have dropped through the floor, all of that stuff. So to have Nicola Willis come out and go, I reckon me and the fella here can do a better job than this is frightening.
That's such a great point, because what it also shows is a lack of understanding of education, right? So education is about learning critical thinking skills, challenging the way that society works so that we don't always just go down one pathway. And it's about 1999, the curriculum really shifted to be much more holistic. So not physical sex, but sexuality, so emotional, social, and spiritual. Now, spiritual is about what are your values and beliefs? So a health educator, and I've been one for a long time, you're not telling them that this is the right way or this is what you should do. It's exploring how people have different values and attitudes. And you're right, Chewy, we've had a decrease in the amount of young people actually even having sexual intercourse, but we've had decrease in teenage pregnancies, etc. But the research shows if you focus on education and the skills to negotiate those tricky relationships, right? Communication, assertiveness, decision-making. Young people are more, consent's all part of assertiveness, communication, right? Because I have a bit of an issue. We often say we're going to teach consent, right? Well, how do you teach consent? You've got to also look at how do you teach communication skills? Because what do you do when someone is trying to pressure you into that? All right. So it's so much more complicated. And consent is also based around gender norms, right? So there's a lot of gendered assumptions of, but other people would do this, other girls do this. And that pressure plays a part. So education is about helping young people use scenarios to say, what could you do? You could do A, B, C, or D, because you don't know what's going to happen in that moment, right? And if you're only hearing your parents' values of this is what you should do or this is what happens when other people have different values and that's impacting on you? And so I have taught, this subject for 30 years, and I have been through the ups and downs where people go, why are we teaching kids about sex? And I deal with the other side where I work with young people who have been kicked out of home because they were gay, or they're having a real domestic violence type relationships. Well, they've never talked about love with their partner, and that's the joy of the subject. I'll give you an example. This is what sexuality education is about building healthy relationships. So I was in this class and we were doing a whole lessons around love, etc. And it was with my second year university students. And lots of them in this class said this was the first time they'd ever had really good in-depth discussions about anything to do with these topics. This was 19-year-olds, right? Some of them had good quality school education. Some of them could talk to their families, some couldn't, right? So diversity. And anyway, we did this whole lecture on love and lots of discussion. But the next day they came back and this young boy said, right, I want to start the class. Because you can do that in my class.
When does that happen?
That's great, because that's what it's meant. This is the share. This is what learning's about, right? And he said, I want to tell a story. He said, I went home and talked to my partner. She's 20. And I said, we learned about love languages today. And you know what? We realised we show our love in different ways. And we ended up talking for an hour about our relationship. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
Isn't that what it's meant to be about? Yeah. And yet, so it's not just parents. Parents are there, okay? Parents have a responsibility, but we'll talk about what that responsibility looks like in a minute. But sexuality is occurring everywhere. You're learning from movies, TV, your friends. So school offers that critical lens to say, what do you think about this? How does this harm well-being or how does it enhance well-being? And what about cultural diversity too? So,
hey, Tracy, how does society approach like age appropriate conversations, and how does that fit into the education sector? Because a lot of the time when you hear a conservative type person, you know, whether they're a religious person or whatever, it seems to always be talking about that. And I only bring up this picture of this book because it's in the news at the moment. It seems to be quite controversial. I'm not sure why I haven't read the book. I'm not neither denouncing nor upholding the book.
Yeah.
But I've seen comments going around by people saying this is in the library for 10-year-olds, saying as young as 8 can read it. But when I looked it up, it's like recommended for 14, 15 and above.
It is.
So I kind of wonder how do we communicate? How do you communicate with society as to what is age appropriate, what is not? And I'll preface that by using some information from your article. I think it was 53% of 11 to 14-year-olds have seen pornography. So my 14-year-old may have already seen a little bit or witnessed on video or something what anal sex is. That book talks about it and explains it. But how do you push back, or where is the line between like a conservative parent or a conservative school and what is actually age appropriate and what is not?
Oh, where do I start? Okay, first of all, I know, because I wrote, you need to read my thesis, right? It took me 6 years to do it, but it's now available in the library. And I've got 5 chapters of findings, but I talk a lot about what's age appropriate. The problem is that's a constructed term of what is a child, all right? We have constructed who determines what is a child or not, and we've also constructed what's age appropriate or not. And, parents need to take some of their own responsibility. That's really important to know your child. But we also have to remember that those young people are learning about the world. So you just told me about the anal sex, your son might have seen it, or daughter, right? The reality is they are seeing a lot of stuff online.
Yeah.
But most of them are curious, or it's accidental, and most of them actually don't like it. They want to talk about it. Okay, so that's one thing. I'm going to give you an example before I start the answer to that question. So one of the parents in my group set up an environment where her children could ask anything. If you had a question, it was totally fine. And basically she told the story of her 9-year-old, and her 9-year-old came to her and said, "Oh, can I ask you something?" She goes, "Of course you can, sweetie." And then the child said, "Can I write it down? I don't want to say it." She said, "Of course you can." Anyway, carrying on. And he said, "Can we go into the bedroom?" She's like, "Of course you can." Anyway, the question was, I heard they were talking at school, and I want to know where the poo goes when people have anal sex. Now, that was a question from a 9-year-old.
Wow.
And if you want to know how the parent answered it, you can see my thesis. But they answered it beautifully. And what that showed you is that young people are making sense of the world. And I'm not saying good sense, but they are trying to make sense of it. And if you don't have those spaces, where do you go? And that's the first thing. Same thing. So when we come back to age, because I'm going to talk about age in a minute, I brought home a report I've been doing this field for a long time, and I worked with the classification office around pornography and right resources. My son came home, and you'll kill me if he sees this, but I don't think he will. But he has given me consent. I asked him about this report, and this report had said that, 90% of parents, said something around pornography that pornography was a problem for young people. They only asked yes or no, right? So you think if you have to answer that question, is pornography a problem for young people? Yes or no? So I think something like 95% said it is, right? Yeah, so I asked my son, who was 10 at the time. He was in first year of intermediate. And he said, "Mum, that's a stupid question. It's a problem for some people, but not for others. I mean, there's one person in my class, but he's a dickhead, and we all know that he's been," I won't tell the story on because it's being recorded. But I learned from that moment of what my son was knowing and thinking about and experiencing. Because the key to age appropriate is about knowing what's right for your child, okay? And the reason I like that book is you'll read it with them. If they're not interested, they'll go, "Ugh," and walk away. If they are interested, they will have questions. But what you've told them is, it's okay. it's okay to ask questions. And you know that they're getting the right information. So throughout all my research with parents and young people, you know, that book for 12, 13-year-olds, I think is awesome. I think it's a fabulous resource. And people have slammed me for saying that. They've told me I'm grooming children. But if you've worked in the space long enough, you'd know that basically hiding or silencing information causes shame. It causes people like my parents in my research who talked about still feeling dirty about their bodies as adults, not wanting to get undressed in front of their kids because they still felt shame about their bodies. I didn't have a single parent group that I interviewed, and I did a lot of them, who didn't disclose some form of sexual abuse through shame, hiding information. They didn't know what was wrong.
Wow.
And to me, isn't that why we're here? We're here because I want my students, I want my parents to, you know, I want to have healthy relationships and feel good about who we are. And that's what sexuality education is about. It's about our identity. It's about who we're attracted to. And it's about what we actually do. I could give you a million stories from 30 years in this space. And so I'm willing to put up with the crap.
I bet.
And I've had to deal with a lot of crap. But I look at those young people who sit in front of me when they've been dealing with some pretty bad stuff, and I'm thinking, no, it's not worth it. We need to do this. It's important. And here's another thing. We're also working with the Netherlands on this project, right? So Pua Waitunga, Beyond the Birds and Bees, our online platform. Mm-hmm. The Netherlands have some of the best rates of contraceptive use, lower rates of everything that's negative, because they acknowledge that young people are sexual beings. It doesn't mean they're having sex. It means they're making sense of the world around them. You know? So
I think a lot of parents, when they get nervous about this sort of stuff, I think there's sometimes a clear delineation between primary school kids and secondary school kids, right? And sex and health education might be fine for secondary school, but keep it out of the primary schools. They're just little children. I asked a few people that I work with and friends of mine, I said, if you didn't learn anything about this sort of stuff at school, when would you have learned it from your parents? And the overwhelming answer to that was too late.
Yeah. I mean, that's just classic, isn't it? And if I give you what my young people wanted to know, same thing. They were saying that the parents are not talking, and you've got to remember society has changed. And so, yes, there is some parental responsibility to open up the conversations. Now, what I mean by that is not just, okay, we're going to have a talk, because you know what happens. It's like, all right, conversations happen throughout life. So primary school, it starts with what's consent in year 1, right? Consent begins from there. No, you can't steal that other person's pencil case. No, you don't have to do this unless that person's given you consent, right? So that continues. What's a good friend? Okay, so if I asked you what's a good friend, you might say, well, you know, you be respectful and you ask them what they want and you play fairly. Doesn't that just the same thing as we move into adulthood and relationships? Good communication. So in the primary school, RSE, relationships and sexuality education, is about building relationships. The only thing that some parents are not happy about is naming body parts, right? And we do that in year 1, all right? Simple as that. This is the vulva, penis, etc. Now, we know from extensive research that protects young people against sexual abuse, right? And, you know, I wanted to make sure that my young sons, you know, knew their own body parts, but also to respect other people's body parts, right? You don't have the right to go and touch somebody else. So that's sexuality education, right? Simple as that. And as we move into year 7, 8, that's when they start to look at things like contraception and conception. But, you know, a lot of young people have seen the 2 dogs humping. They've got an idea. They've watched the movies. You think about, I don't know about you, Pat, I don't know, Chewy, if you've got kids. You think about some of the movies they watch now, they're learning about relationships, gender expectations, sex, lack of condom use, right? You don't see it in movies. And porn has 3% of porn shows condom use. So
Yeah.
You know,
And
they're
they
learning
and they
it.
can get it all, and they can get it all here if they've got them.
Oh,
Hey, listen, just to
and
maybe
yeah,
to wrap up, based on your experience, because I want to bring it back to the Nicola Willis comment,
yes,
which again was, based on our values and our views of the world. I want education system to be focused on teaching my children to read and write and do maths. This is a National Party thing at the moment. They're trying to move away from
yeah, I
anything
know.
that's not just academia. But that her perception might be the minority, but as you say, it's loud, it's often religious,
Yep.
it's often conservative. What would you say specifically to those parents, those caregivers, those families who are like, don't teach my kids don't say penis to my kids, or whatever, even more minor things that it is? What would you say to those parents to help them get over, pardon the pun, that hump, to maybe make their kids safer and, give their kids more information about the world around them as themselves being a part of that world?
And I think that's a really valid point too. Like, I suppose I've been in this field long enough that I see everyone's views. First of all, you can't shelter your children. I've got many students who have grown up in those types of families who have also felt they've missed out on a lot of key things for their relationships as they get older. But your values are important, and you should be sharing your values with your children. They want to hear what you think. But they live in a world that's now very different, and you need to allow them to have sexuality education in school. And remember that it focuses on critical thinking, developing the skills for relationships, right? And the skills to be inclusive. You don't have to agree with people who might identify as a different gender, because that's a big area that a lot of them are worried about, that we're trying to change children's gender. You can't change a child how they feel about themselves, but you can have conversations and make them feel safe and supported. So first of all, one, I'd say, remember that go and look at what the curriculum is. You'll be surprised if you talk with your school and actually go and look at what they're teaching, how good it is. Secondly, I do agree that schools need to consult better with parents. So that's probably my number one thing I want to write about from my research, is that all the parents in my research were so supportive of RSE, but they didn't feel they knew enough what was being taught, and they wanted schools to consult and just explain it a bit more. So I would say to those parents, don't listen to all the stuff you're hearing in the media. Go and talk to your school and your teacher and tell them what you want, and find out also a shared space. But remember, it's about those skills, those critical thinking skills, so your young person can navigate the world. And that's what we want.
A couple of comments and then one question, and then we'll wrap up. Tracy, Politically says, what I would have given for asexuality to be discussed during sex ed could have saved me a whole lot of time and grief. Brenda says, in 80s, no sex ed in my high school, 4 girls in my class pregnant at 15. Jay says, I am a 21-year-old individual who is gay and grew up in conservative Southland. I don't agree with Nicola Willis's view on sex education. It lacks breadth and inclusivity. So just there's been tons of chats going through, but there's just a few of them. And one question,
and can I say, if they want to have a look at my thesis online, for example, that's the same stories coming through when you shelter people or you silence stuff. It does a lot of harm.
It's so consistent as well when you go out and see those stories and you have people that recount their upbringing and that sort of thing, and there's some devastating stories there as well. People who were sheltered, found out who they were much later in life, completely cut ties with their parents, either from their direction or the parents' direction, and you can't suppress who someone is without some massive consequences down the line.
It's basically it can be an emotional or mental health version of kids who are left-handed being forced to write right-handed before we thought it wasn't the tool of the devil to be left-handed. And we know the research that's come out of that talks about those kids used to do things, many of them like stuttering and have issues around lots of things because they were forced to do something unnatural. I don't see it as any different, but maybe it's more mental and emotional than physical, but still being forced to do something you're not is the worst thing.
Yeah, and that's why we've moved away from the word sex education. But did you notice that's what Nicola Willis said? Because it's a rhetoric, right? So say sex scares people. But if you look at that book, Welcome to Sex, it's about understanding care for others, diversity, knowing your body parts. And I love that comment about asexuality. So I was talking with a young boy the other day he's 19, identifies as, as male and everything else, but he just doesn't want a girlfriend, right? Not interested. Likes a sport. He said, I can't be bothered. But everyone keeps telling me I've got to get a girlfriend. He says, I don't want to be anything. I just want to be me. So, it's just that pressure on people can't we just allow people to be themselves?
And lastly, Tracy, just a question that I think a lot of people have on their mind as well. Wonder how easy access to hardcore porn has changed society. If you've been doing this for 30 years, then you will have seen, I've held my cell phone once already, but you'll have seen the inclusion of these into society and how access to things like hardcore porn and everything is now in most teenagers' pockets. How has that changed society? And maybe, if you could briefly tell us maybe, how has it changed how we need to talk about sex and sexuality in general?
Well, great question, because that's a big part of my research that I did with the classification office, etc. Young people can access it, and they are accessing it because no one's talking about sex. So how am I going to learn? All right, you can't blame young people for what adults do to start with. And what we are finding is that there has been an increase in problems, gendered issues around people having anal sex, all right? Not necessarily because they wanted to, but they've seen it in porn and they want their partner to try it. And so that's issues of communication, consent. What are your values? How do you deal with that if someone's pressuring you? And so what happens if we go back to that very beginning comment from Nicola Willis, imagine a parent says, now it's really important that you always please your partner, all right? And then your partner wants to have anal sex, but you don't want to, but you've been told you've got to please your partner. So sexuality education gets people to critique and say, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, right.
And that's,
really
can I just finish with a couple of things? The findings of my thesis, which I've got to write up, is basically it's been positive. I've done a positive thesis in terms of how do we help parents? How do we support all parents? And the number one thing is to ask open questions. Don't be judgmental. Don't go on the fear and shame. It's like, what do you think about that? And that's like, oh my golly, what are they going to say? But that's the most important part of education, is both of you learning together and saying, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, what do you think? Should we try and find out? Or where can we? And it's those shared moments that young people go, it's safe to talk to my parent. And isn't that cool? And that's what I love about, I don't know about you two, I love being a parent. It's hard work, but it's cool. They challenge me now as 19-year-olds. Damn it.
That's true. It's true. A lecturer in the School of Health Sciences, University of Canterbury. That's Dr. Tracy Clelland. And if people want to find your research, we'll put a link in our socials and that kind of stuff as well. But if people want to go looking for it now or before we get it up there, how do they find it, Tracy?
So at the moment, my PhD, which I'll write some more articles from, I will send you the link. They can download it for free. Just look at the findings and the conclusion. The findings are just all stories from parents based on and linked to theory. The stories will prove to you why we need to do this. It's so good. Awesome. And I also, just one thing, don't forget Te Pua Waitanga, Beyond the Birds and Bees, our new platform, which we've created for parents and young people with correct knowledge that they can go and look at. All free, not sponsored by anyone. We just wanted to pull together the best stuff for parents. So I'll give you that link too.
That's amazing. Hey, thanks, Tracy. We really appreciate you giving us some time all the way from China this evening and your afternoon. So thanks for joining us.
Cool, no problem. Hey, lovely
all the best.
To talk to you both.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks so much.
There you go. Lots of comments about there. Thanking Tracy for coming on board. That was amazing. Chewy, any thoughts?
Oh, look, I feel a little bit let out. Obviously, I don't have kids and that sort of thing, but my mind just keeps going back to me being a teenager and the experiences that I had. I don't think I had a particularly bad run through sex and health education and that sort of thing, but it's definitely moved on, and I think in my opinion at least, an enormously helpful way. Like when I came through, it was very much mechanical. Like, here's what your bits are called, and this is where they go, and don't let a stranger touch you. That sort of thing. And I think there's more about just general consent. I think people of my age that have had terrible relationships. I know someone who died through domestic violence and that sort of thing. The way that this topic has become more holistic and opened up to questions of gender identity and sexuality and consent and all of that sort of stuff is enormously helpful. And to have everyone go through it in more or less a standardized way at a more or less standardized time in their life, I think it just ends up with a better society with better outcomes for people. And when we hark back to what Nicola has said here, no one is stopping her from imparting her values to her kids how she wants at any time. Yeah. I believe that most of these things are also opt-out. So the schools would put out, hey, look, this is what we're tackling. This is what's involved. Let us know, sort of thing. I'm happy to be corrected on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how they'll still do it. Yeah, I think Nicola Willis is talking from her very narrow point of view. I thought you were going
to say from your asshole, and that might have been another conversation to have with Tracy, but maybe not.
And again, putting her values, projecting her very specific values onto a country that does not, in the majority, share them.
I think as well that so often it's a little bit like the whole kind of, not being who you want to be. I think when you put it in a context that people understand, like forcing left-handers to be right-handers, they sort of understand. Like I think about this idea, my kid, I love maths. Like I'm a maths nerd, right? I watch Countdown, 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown, and just the original Countdown. I've got into an algorithm on YouTube where I'll bring up the maths equations on Countdown. They just come up all the time and I just watch them and nothing else. And my kid's learning algebra at the moment, and I'm just like, oh, I love algebra. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. But I'm not going to go, now, you're not going to learn this at school. I'm going to teach you my way of doing it. Do you know what I mean? How silly does that sound? I'm going to teach, because I'm very good at it, and I'm going to teach you my way of doing it, and you're going to learn my way of doing it, and I'm going to impart my methodology into you. No, she's going to learn at school, and I'm going to go, please bring your homework to me. Please bring your homework, and I'll help you there. But I'm not, you know what I mean? How different is that? You're getting taught at school something, and I'm going to impart things to her as well. Why does it need to be any different?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, like when I think about this curriculum and this topic and that sort of thing, I wonder how much engagement they would get if they, in the coming months, we're going to be talking to your kids about this. We're going to do a run through of it for adults. Yeah. If you're interested.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking that the majority of parents would be, actually, yes, I do want to learn this sort of stuff. And I wonder if there is a hesitancy to do that because they're going to run into the parents that are like, you're turning my kid trans, you're grooming. I've seen it on Fox. I'm going to be angry.
Fuck, dude. I was watching something today about grooming and pedophilia, and they were talking about the drag community and that kind of stuff. And the point that just gets made always by people who think is, where do the pedophiles and actual groomers come from? They come from the straight, typically white male community more often than not. They come from the religious communities. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I kind of feel like I'm lucky to have gotten out of the Catholic Church without a priest fucking fiddling me, and I got out. I'm a survivor because I got through without it being done. Yeah, for some reason, I mean, show us the cases of these groomers and pedophiles coming out of, for example, the drag community. There's always going to be one, because drag community is made up of people, and people do these things. But by far and away, if you look at the majority, that's not the community they come from. So I'm just like, the narrative that people try and sell with that is ridiculous. It's just, it makes me angry.
I mean, I remember a common refrain growing up in Timaru that you wanted to look for the girls that go to the Catholic schools, because there might be a harder nut to crack, but when you crack them,
I've heard that as well.
And Jesus, but that's what it was like. It's like I went to a co-ed school that tackled this stuff. I knew that there were high schools in my town that didn't. The single sex schools were bad. The Catholic schools were horrific.
Yeah.
And you would see that in the guess who got knocked up at 15 or 16.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So we'll get those links out there to you guys about Tracy's research and that. So just make sure you follow me and Chewy on Twitter, and also we'll put them on the Facebook page and stuff as well. All right, we need to move on because we've got 2 more topics to actually talk about tonight, Chewy. The first one's quite a quickie, because speaking of sex ed, sexual exploration, because it's the Guardian doing some polling on New Zealand politics. I don't know. I'm not quite entirely sure why, but you know, it's a
you could say that
poll
about a lot of things that the Guardian does, though.
Yeah. But I've had a look at the methodology and I've had a look at what they've got to say, and it seems that, you know, it's not. I mean, you can always say right leaning or whatever, but you know, when they look down here, I haven't brought it up, but they look down here as to the like the statement testing politics. All of these seem to come out as pretty even. You know, like this is various questions. Like, I have a good idea of what members of Parliament generally do. You know, who people vote for can make a big difference. What happens in New Zealand? It's not like it's a massive swing one way or the other in their testing questions. So, you know, take it with a grain, but take it as you will. The results came out today, and it's pretty much a similar sort of a trend, other than they say New Zealand First is going to be there. They're currently polling 5.3 in this situation. They have Labour at 29. They have National at 34.5. They have the Greens at 8.5. They have ACT at 11.6. This, of course, puts National and ACT together at about 45, 46%, and Labour Greens at about 37.5, plus you put 2.5 for the Māori Party, 40 to 46, which is similar to other polling that we've probably seen going around at the moment. It does seats in the House, which we don't really pay much attention to, but what it does show us is if you're looking at the blocks, I mean, you know, there's the 1, 2, 3 blocks for the left, and there's the 1, 2 blocks for the right, and then there's New Zealand First in the middle, probably getting close to being balance of power in this, although in this particular poll, they do put National and ACT to 61, which would get them there in theory, although not that we look at that. Again, though, one of the anomalies of these pollings at the moment that we see is that Christopher Hipkins is still far more liked than Christopher Luxon. And we've said it before that lots of the research and lots of the people far smarter than us that talk about this say if you're not the preferred prime minister, the chances of your party getting elected is much more difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's much more difficult. At the moment, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is strongly negative and 10 is strongly positive, please indicate how you feel about each of the following people. Christopher Hickson's total positive, which means a ranking of between 7 and 10. He got 43%. Christopher Luxon 32%, totally neutral, which is 4 to 6%, 30. Christopher Luxon 26. So basically 3/4 of the people either thought neutrally or positively of Hipkins, and about 58% of people thought either neutral or positive of Christopher Luxon. And I still think that's just a fascinating situation for National to be in. They'll be happy with the polls overall, but he's just still not liked, Chewy. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Oh, it shouldn't be hard to figure out, Pat. It's easy as ABK.
Easy as 1, 2, 7. Simple as dough, may chicken.
One thing that I thought of, right? So you can't trust these polls, but if New Zealand First is back, where does all the criticism about a 3-party coalition become a coalition of chaos?
Yeah. Well,
would that somehow blow back on some of the comments that you might have consistently made over the last couple of months?
No, because after they get elected and it's all over, it's not that no one cares, but no one's going to pay attention to it.
I will not let them forget that for their entire term.
But you might also find, you know, the one thing here's the one thing that's scarier than Winston Peters joining those two parties to make a bigger coalition. You know, the one thing that's scarier? A hung parliament with Winston Peters sitting across the benches. In other words, having all the power. That there is more terrifying to me than even a right-wing led government.
When will we learn? Don't give Winston the balance of power.
Maybe what we should do a thing next week with enough time out that we should play some wagers. Like, I like to watch Inside the NBA. It's a show that Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet Smith and another guy are on. And at the start of each season, they put their predictions up and they put them like on the wall for you to see. Maybe we should do that next week. Maybe we should have a think over the weekend, Chewy, you and I, and maybe we should do some. This is what we think will happen, and we'll see it doesn't matter, but we'll see how right or wrong we were. Like if I said to you right now, Chewy, who's going to win? What would you say? Like this is without any thought, but who would you say? What's the government going to be?
Unfortunately, my mind is going to the fact that it might be National Act.
Yeah.
And I hate saying that. I've verbalized it. I've put it out into the world, and I hate myself. It's so like I mean, we talk about it all the time. I'm constantly exposed to the media saying, "Look, National Act can form a government of 62%." You know, that sort of thing. And then when it comes around to the election, it's never that cut and dry.
Yeah.
I would hope that you're right, and that there hasn't been a government, an MMP government, where the winner has the least popular leader.
Yeah.
You know, by the same token, I've made comments before that I hate that people base their vote off, I like that guy,
I'd have a beer with him.
Vote, you know, that I think that's reductive as well. You know, I would love for people to see what I see and see that the Green Party has put out the most consistently structured set of policies out of anybody.
Yep.
And I'd love to see them rewarded for that. But I don't have that much hope.
Some people are throwing some bits and bobs in here as well. Simon says National New Zealand First government, a National New Zealand First government act would have to provide confidence in supply. That's interesting.
Jesus. Yeah, it's. I hope that when it comes to New Zealand First, that Winston has pissed off enough people on both sides.
Yeah.
That he cuts his own throat. Like there's people that are still fuming with him that he put Jacinda in. There are people that are still fuming at him for pandering to the cranks afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, he's a classic fence sitter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, interesting. I mean, to be really honest with you, I'm sort of filibustering a little bit because I don't want you to ask me the same question back, because I actually have no idea what's going to happen. I really genuinely don't. I mean, after speaking to Bomber last week and him talking about, you know, traditionally the polls are out by 4 to 5%, then that means a left government can be there. But I tend to think about, I mean, I've said this way the whole way through, right? Is that at one stage I was saying if you were to place a bet, it would be 51-49 right to left at the moment, chances of winning. I feel like it might be 55-45 or 53-47, because within that margin of error, it's still you know, a hair's breadth. But I don't know. I'm seeing people talking about drinking heavily on election night. I guess I think that we should. Here we go. Was it a political? I know one thing about election night. I'm going to need several very strong drinks to make it through until the results are counted and some after. I think you're going to have various. It might be you might have very strong drinks for several days for Kiwi, because it might be one of those elections, especially if Winston's involved. Close. Could be weeks.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been selling T-shirts and hoodies that say "At the left vote, the left win." So, you know, if that's not true, then we have to do refunds or something. I don't know.
Well, it is true. It's just if the left decides to get out and vote, that's what it's about.
Yeah. So, look, I don't think it's really changed what we've been saying for a couple of months. It's going to be close.
Yeah.
Like this isn't going to be a landslide. None of the polls suggest that anybody's going to fucking romp home. And the margin of error on these things is enough to swing it one way or the other. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a nail biter. I'm going to say the same thing I've been saying all along, is we've got to get as many people to the polls as possible, and just become insufferable.
Yeah.
And just remind people, whatever your views are, the last 4 years, you cannot say that it doesn't matter who gets it.
Speaking of insufferable, might be time to talk about Karen Plunket, maybe.
Oh.
See what I did there? So you do the classic stand-up jokes and they work really well. I do the cheesy segues, and I'm not saying they work really well, but...
Industry professional.
That's what I'm about. So here's something for you people. You probably are already aware of this, but because I've told you, the rumor is that the Right Family Foundation aren't that stoked about Sean Plunket at the moment. And it's not even a rumor, it's confirmed, because Sean Plunket told the world that they had a meeting with the Right Family Foundation certainly one of the members of it, and they made a decision to stop getting conspiracy theorists on. It was a directive from the partners that they wanted it to stop. So what happens in the middle of a conversation when Sean Plunket accidentally realizes he's platforming Counterspin talking points? If you haven't seen the thumbnail for this episode yet, the face that I've got with Sean Plunket in that thumbnail is the actual face from this clip you're about to see when he realizes he's broadcasting to his audience Counterspin talking points. Now, much like we said last night, why would he then go and amplify it? I wouldn't have known about this if it hadn't been on a clip that came across my YouTube feed. I don't know. But what I've got for you now is this actually is about a 6-minute clip. I don't think we're going to necessarily interrupt it. We're going to let it play out. It's something I assembled and made today. It will go up on Twitter after the show today, so if you want to share it around, you're more than welcome to. But it's Sean Plunket talking to someone who was at the Palmerston North Julian Bachelor meeting. Now, you know we've spoken to Victoria and Hannah. Victoria, who was absolutely assaulted at that meeting, and Hannah, who was part of the organising team of that meeting. Now, Julian Bachelor had come out on the platform talking about, we got assaulted too. So they've tracked down this person who says that she was one of the people that got assaulted as a supporter of Julian Bachelor. I'm going to play you some of this. I'm going to show you who that person is. And I'm going to let you see when Karen realizes Counterspin Media are now basically speaking to his audience through his platform. Right? So this is already there. It's a self-enclosed bit. I'm going to push play and I'm going to let you have a look at it, and then we'll have a talk about it afterwards.
And many 5G weapons experts are telling us that nanoparticulates in the human body will be the body's connectivity to the coming 15-minute city, digital ID, blockchain, CBDC, 5G slavery system. And as we know, 5G not only mimics COVID symptoms in the human body, but its effects are multiplied exponentially once metal particulates are introduced into the body. Then there's the whole other issue of how those fraudulent tests are being used to prop up the pandemic lie, justify lockdowns, spread fear, and hide jab injuries by diagnosing their symptoms as COVID.
Yes, it is.
These tests have been proven over and over to be fraudulent.
Wow.
Now, did you know Julian before this? Have you been involved in political activism before, Samantha?
No, not really. I mean, I had met Julian many years before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you politically active in any other way, Samantha?
Politically active, well, I mean, I definitely, I have an interest, much more in the last couple of years than I did in any
Right,
years
but you're not a
that.
member of a political party, you're not standing for office, you're not helping anyone run a political campaign?
No.
No, right.
All the footage is available on Counterspin Media on their Facebook page or the Twitter page, the actual footage.
How did it get to them?
Well, they did an episode called the United Nations Great Kiwi Swindle, Co-Governance Exposed. And I know, people at Counterspin, so...
Do you know people at Counterspin? Who do you know at Counterspin?
Kelvin and Hannah.
Oh, so you're friends of theirs?
That was the face,
Yes.
by the way. That's the face.
So,
That's the thumbnail.
Samantha, you said you weren't politically active, right?
I'm not involved in any political party as such. No.
Okay, so
No,
how
but
well
I've
do you
had
know?
some
How do you now? Well, do you know Kelvin and Anna?
Well, I know them well enough to know that from listening to what they've had to say in the last couple of years, I guess I've just gathered more respect because they have been right about everything that they've been talking about. I just need to say that they were shouting my name, possibly because a week or two before that I had gone along to the drag time story hour here at the museum in Palmy and politely...
I've never been politically active. I've never done political activism, but just by chance I attended a drag time story hour to protest, but I've never been politically active.
And respectfully asked the drag queen, why they felt they needed to be there.
I bet it was respectful.
Yeah.
And they didn't appreciate that, and there was a lot of hatred around that.
So they were the same people at the anti-K governance counter protest as were at the drag queen thing.
Yes, the I guess what you'd call far left woke brigade was there in droves, and a lot of those people were there.
Got that on my bingo
There
card.
was a drag queen in stilettos with a big platinum wig who literally caged me in the entire time with a flag, and his friend, this rainbow lady. They were covering my phone and preventing me from being able to film the entire night. So yeah, there was...
I believe that rainbow lady might be someone we know who we've had on the show. I believe that she won't name her, but that rainbow lady might be someone associated with someone we've spoken to recently.
There's a strong LGBTQ contingent.
Okay.
Strong.
So 7 minutes of Plunket allowing, with no evidence provided for his guest to tell the story of assault. He gives the mildest pushback as even he realises how unreliable this witness is.
And look, I'll be brutally honest with you. Counterspin are not a media organisation. The people behind it, I think, are highly questionable morally, Samantha. Can I also ask you, are a member of any other group like Voices for Freedom?
Because he's worried now.
No, I'm not.
Okay, but you do seem to be involved in a whole... You said to me you weren't political, and I'm sorry, just from what you've told me and your associations, you sound like you are.
Well, you asked me specifically if I was a member of a
Okay, and
party.
you deliberately... I'm just
He didn't actually. He asked her if she was a political activist. That was one of the questions he asked.
going to put it to you, Samantha. You answered it in a way you knew what I was getting at, and you answered a way which kind of got around it.
Well, no, I mean, I think you could say anyone's political. In this day and age, anyone who cares about the state of our country is going to be politically inclined.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm politically inclined.
And I'm not saying that this makes me believe the veracity of your story any less. I think you've given us a quite chilling account of what things are getting to at these meetings, and it's just such a pity that the police do not intervene, whatever your views or politics, to protect a citizen like you, because that, damn it, is their job, isn't it?
So finally, Plunket wraps up his interview by making some absolute statements. In other words, he speaks it like it's absolute truth that further his narrative that he wants on his platform, while still attempting to distance himself from the source and her colleagues.
That is Samantha Edwards, clearly the victim.
Clearly,
from
the
what she
victim.
accounted to us of an assault
Clearly.
and harassment outside
Absolutely.
Clearly the victim of an assault, because she told me, and it suits my narrative.
Stop co-governance meeting in Palmerston North 2 weeks ago. And sounds to me, whether or not you agree, and Counterspin, look, honestly, those people are not nice people. I'm just going to say it.
Coming from a not nice
they're
people.
certainly not journalists. The
I know,
guy's a
not nice
fantasist, an absolute blowhard fantasist.
Blowhard from King
But that
Blowhard.
doesn't mean that, Samantha Edwards' story isn't true.
Now, what
Oh,
Plunket
doesn't
says is true. What his guest background is doesn't necessarily make her account untrue. What it does do is question her reliability as a witness, and she has an obvious agenda, a fact that a journalist, in speech marks, should have probably delved into and not just taken as absolute fact. Now, a few things about that little clip that I made this afternoon. Here is the first. How many things, or how many ways, and how many things can Sean Plunket call on to make an opposing opinion invalid? Do you remember, for example, Suze Wilson, trade unionist? Do you remember talking to people about being student politicians? Do you remember about being woke? Do you remember about being on the left? All of those things in Sean Plunket's world cause him to think that the other person's opinion is invalid. He has a million ways to cancel people's opinions based on far flimsier accusations than not just I know Hannah and whatever his name is from Counterspin, but I make content for them and I have an agenda that wants to speak against these people. So it's part of her, I don't know whether it's a pay job or a hobby or whatever, it's part of her, the lady's gig to actually put out this content. To me, that's far more damning of an agenda than, oh yeah, when I was a student, I called myself a Marxist. Oh, well, your opinion doesn't matter 43 years later, Chewy. Yeah, anyway, that was one of the things that just made me think, Chewy, how easy is it for him to delete people's opinion based on far less?
Oh, absolutely. And if only this man who had spent decades as a journalist could hold a coherent, consistent thought across whatever point he's trying to make. I love the fact that he's fallen into this absolutely easy trap, right? Vet your guests.
Yeah.
I don't know, do a Google search would have brought up all of that. That's something that is like the bare minimum. He keeps on just bamboozling himself. Like
that's the moment.
I know the context of this, but that's almost like a come hither wink, which is unsettling.
No, that's the moment going, oh shit. Oh shit. That's that moment.
Up. I done fucked up. I just want to say the chat absolutely went off during that. Everybody really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
And I do want to highlight, and I don't often do this, a discussion that happened because it is just the gold standard.
Okay.
Where did it start? Emma with a classic double comment here. Woke brigade, woke brigade, woke brigade. Woo! Woke brigade. And then that was picked up by Dr. Ratweasel. Get a grip, Emma. And Emma, straight off, I think there's nanoseconds between these comments. Grip these nuts. If I could nominate that interaction for an Emmy or a Pulitzer Prize, I absolutely would. Absolute gold standard. Thank you very much.
Hey, there's one other thing I wanted to highlight to you on the video, because I think we've got a fan. Would you like to see our fan? Mm-hmm. I think we've got a fan. Someone is watching us, Chewy. Because at the start of the clip, Karen was talking about these people who had done the protesting at Palmerston North, and you could just hear the love in his voice about the platform, small p, that those people went on to talk about it. And I think we've got a fan.
And whilst much was made recently of two incidents inside the halls where a woman snuck in and blew a whistle and says she was assaulted, and she went on all sorts of minor moronic online media shows.
Oh, shut up!
Big deal. No.
Yay! So I think he might have given us a T-shirt. BHN, minor moronic online shows.
Can we? Okay, when we do the next T-shirt run,
he was talking about us. Karen was talking about us.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do our next T-shirt run, and maybe this is just a special one-off that we just do for Sean, or maybe this is one that people would like to buy. Maybe we do our logo on the front and then his on the back, and we call it the platform, small p.
Little p.
Small
baby
p.
p? Small p.
Small little baby p. PP. Small PP energy.
Along with the Ku Klux Klan.
Minor moronic. The fucking cheek on it. We're majorly moronic.
Yeah, fucking oats. The one other thing I wanted to say, and look, obviously we're having a bit of fun with it. And to be honest, I don't really care about the content that the person was sharing. The thing that I find hilarious is that Ms. Plunket is trying to get away from conspiracy theorists because business mummy and daddy said so. Yet, like we've said many times, if we were doing a podcast about how to fix your engine, then mechanics would listen. These are the people still listening to the platform. They are the people who are still listening to the platform, and that's what his audience still is. Now, maybe not as strong as it used to be in that area, but certainly strong. Now, I pointed out during the conversation when he said, was definitely assaulted. Now, that's based on what she said and what furthers his narrative. Now, what He also said at the start of that clip, which I didn't play, he didn't use the word alleged. He said something like a woman who says she was assaulted.
Oh, yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
We'll bring the receipts, you waste of fuck space. like we'll bring the receipts, and we'll always bring the receipts, and you'll look for a conspiracy theorist to further your narrative, and you'll freak the fuck out in the middle of it because you'll realize, I'm furthering counterspin talking points. Here's the receipts for the assault, you absolute waste of space. I'm just, it's like it's all fun and games for us because we don't have not that we don't have skin in the game, but we don't have to. We're not the people who suffer the ill effects of this thing, Chewy. You know what I'm saying? We're pretty safe, and we're male, and we're Caucasian, and we don't really come under any of the stresses that a lot of people do. But to take the evil position to further a narrative, which, if I'm even being generous, I will say which hasn't been proven. I'm not even going to say which is absolutely wrong. I've actually got access to a whole bunch of the footage that she's talking about. I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to see how she was treated when she left the building, and then I'm going to broadcast it. So I may be prepared to make a statement about how she was treated later on. At the moment, I'll say at the very least, Plunket has seen no evidence of it, and to come out saying she was absolutely assaulted, it's the worst kind of worst. It's not just dog whistling; it's absolutely shouting from the rooftops, that the narrative you want to put out there is anti the protester and pro the racist, misogynistic content going on inside those meetings. Now, let me also say this really clearly. If she was assaulted, like we've done in the past before, if all these things are proven, we will also denounce and talk about that. I think I'm going to a protest on Saturday. And I'm going to be speaking very clearly and loudly if I see anybody committing any acts of any sort of pushing around. I will be stepping in to stop that because it's not okay. It's not okay. And if it's happened to her, I'll speak out against it as well. However, Plunket doesn't know a fucking thing of what's true and not true. We've just showed him some truth in that photo, but because he doesn't know a fucking thing, for him to say she was absolutely assaulted is not just wrong, it's unethical to highlight a word that's used about him often. Sorry, Chewy.
Yeah, but he's not beholden to the Broadcast Standards Authority because he does what we do. So he can do whatever he wants. Morality and good sense and respect doesn't come into it. Look, it's one of the core differences between us and the platform, right? One, he's beholden to someone who's given him a whole lot of money, and we've skipped that by not having any money. And he's gone out looking for something that will cement the narrative that he wants to do. We've also got a narrative that we would like to be true. But I guarantee you, when you go through that footage, if you find that that's not true, we will talk about how it's not true, or we will acknowledge the fact, well, actually, yeah, she was clearly assaulted, and here's the footage. It's called integrity. It's called standards.
One of the things I've already heard, and I've spoken to people with the footage, is I've already heard that I have to recheck all these details, but I'm pretty sure in the interview with Plunket, she talked about not being able to get out. And in the footage, it shows her on the outside of the group trying to push back in. She could have walked away at any stage. Now, I'll check that, and I'll see if that's true, and we'll see what's going to happen. I'm also going to read you, and you actually, have you noticed also I haven't said her name at any point. And it's not because I'm trying to protect her. It's because it's like, I don't feel the need to. This is not a battle against this one individual. This is a battle against the ideology. It's a battle against, the overall tour that Julian Batchelor is going around. So I don't feel the name. I mean, people can find out who she is by listening to the Sean Plunket interview if you want to try and listen to something and not shoot yourself in the head. But about 3 hours ago, the person in question, I'll just call her Samantha because that's her name, said this on her Facebook page. Now, this is public, so anyone can go and see this. I'm not revealing anything. She's got a public page, meaning anyone can see it. This is what Samantha said. I agreed to do it, and I'm not bringing it up because I'm not interested in anyone then doing anything to Samantha to bully her or to do it. I'm not. That's not how I play. So I'm not bringing it up. So if anyone does anything to her or says anything to her or finds her anyway, it's got nothing to do with me. I'm not saying her name. I'm not saying her surname. Nothing. So Samantha says, I agreed to do an interview on the platform this morning, even though I seriously dislike the host, Sean Plunket. I agreed to the interview because it's an important discussion between the first, in the first comment below. So something she does, always the first comment below. The interview went okay. Sean was friendly and treated me quite respectfully, and I'm grateful for that. But after saying goodbye, he seriously insulted people who I care about and respect deeply. Sean Plunket, I can only conclude that the reason you gave such disdain for Counterspin Media and Liz Gunn is because their courage, knowledge, and integrity really shows up your lack of the same. Sean, I challenge you to listen to any of Liz's recent policy videos. My suspicion is that her proficiency and command of the state of politics in this nation would overtake your own within her first sentence. Sean, I also challenge you to point out even one thing that Counterspin has been wrong about. Give it a go. Back yourself like a good journalist would. Well, we've just shown he's not a good journalist. I wonder if you can rescind a journalist. You know, like if you do something wrong, if you're a doctor or a lawyer, you can get that qualification taken away. Maybe you could watch one of Counterspin's episodes about the tremendous harm and fake vaccine has caused to people's hearts. I only wish you'd not dismissed them so quickly. Then perhaps you would have had. Then perhaps you wouldn't have had the serious heart event that you just recently suffered. I'm very sorry that happened to you, but it didn't need to. If only you hadn't scoffed at the information they tried to present you with. Why the intolerance for Counterspin's style of deep investigative journalism, Sean? Your rhetoric is remarkably similar to mainstream media in this regard. If it's too confronting, too revealing, or dare I say unpopular, then it's to be condemned. Open, tolerant, free media? Really? I beg to differ. Isn't it funny that she is saying, you know, I don't want the enemy of my enemy to be my friend. I don't want that. But she is basically saying what everyone else has been saying for a long time. It's not open, it's not tolerant, it's not free, but she's doing it from a point of a conspiracy theorist who, I guess, wants to further her narrative as well. But there you go. That was put up this evening.
God, that's a lot of brain worms.
Yeah.
That's just like, there's more worms than apple there. Far out.
So that would be apple worm then. Because if there's more worms, there'll be apple getting into the worms rather than the worm into the apple.
It's really interesting watching two detestable groups just absolutely have at each other with their own sort of language and their way of talking. And like, you showed me that Facebook page and I felt like I had eye cancer afterwards. It was just, some people are so far down that rabbit hole. There's no pulling them out. You just blow up the hole and move on.
So anyway, poor old Karen. I don't think we have to feel sorry for him, because what he looks for is a story to further the narrative that he wants, no matter how abhorrent the person is that he has to get on. So what he'll do, whether it's active or not, is do no research on the person, because then he never has to make the decision, maybe we shouldn't have this person on. He's got producers that didn't obviously give him the information, or if they did, it just goes to show what a narcissistic personality he has, to say, I care more about the narrative than I do about the person giving the narrative. And he's put himself in a position where he has amplified Counterspin talking points whilst trying to distance himself from Counterspin. Chewy. Feels a bit repetitive, this conversation, doesn't it? About people's dilemmas, amplifying conspiracy theories whilst trying to distance himself from conspiracy theories. The Right Family Foundation is not happy with the conspiracy theories, and then they put it up as a clip. They didn't even go, well, shit, that didn't go too well, lads. We better leave that one off. No, it's up there as a clip. So that then goes to show the kind of professionalism of the outfit as well, and how they don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. I think I'm done with them, Joey. Have you got something to show?
Yeah, just a question. Was he ever a journalist?
Yep.
Yes.
He is a journalist.
And it's amazing to watch someone that has had the career that Sean has had just completely flush it.
But you can say the same about Liz Gunn. Liz Gunn was a serious, qualified, well-presented journalist, and look what she's doing now.
Who's the other one on Fuckwit FM?
Fuckwit FM? I don't know.
Yeah, the Voices for Freedom radio, reality check radio.
Oh, right.
Bryce Edwards?
No. Take the dog. You're talking. Is it Neil Brennan? Is that his name?
No.
I actually know nothing about that guy. I don't know.
Let me have
Peter Williams.
Peter Williams, that's who
Yeah,
I'm talking
Peter
about.
Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, people with long and storied careers.
Yeah.
Just absolutely flushing it. And I mean, this is like Liz Gunn is, you can find old footage of her on the news. She was a good presenter. She seemed to have a brain in her head, and because she's got that broadcasting experience, can be a very convincing speaker. As long as you don't listen to what she's actually saying.
Yeah.
But if you weren't listening to the words, you would go, "This is a very convincing speaker," and that's why these people are extra dangerous, because they will convince people. And there are people that go, "I've seen this person on the news, therefore they must be trusted." So
Indeed.
yeah.
So as we speak, I'm uploading that clip that we just played to my Twitter feed. If anyone wants to use it or share it or whatever, it'll be going. That's going
to go hundies.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, to be honest with you, whānau who watch us, me and Chewy got together this evening. We went, should we do this? Should we not do this? Is this too long? Because I'm always a broadcaster, and I'm like, can I make it shorter? Should we make it shorter? And we thought, no, we'll just play it. See what you guys think. So hopefully you enjoyed that. That was about an hour and a half of my day today, making that 6-minute clip for us all. And yeah, so there we go. So I don't know. I would just be, the thing is, I'd be embarrassed if I realized I had someone on and I'd amplified a whole bunch of counter spin points and then let it go out there. And because to be honest, you haven't seen the whole conversation, but there is a 7-minute gap where he just lets her tell the story. He doesn't push back at all. He kind of goes, "Oh, counterspin. Now give me your story." "Oh, I don't like counterspin. Now help me with my narrative." That's basically the interview in a nutshell. It's terrible. Yeah. Anyway, let's stop talking about Karen.
Can you imagine if we did something like that? We put someone to air and it was like, "Oh, we've got someone here to talk about the latest news about kittens," and they turned out to be a full-blown neo-Nazi by accident. We didn't even plan it.
Is that something neo-Nazis
you would
do?
have to have one of those tearful YouTube mea culpas, like, "I'm sorry I've let you down, fam," and yeah. So you don't want to do that, so you vet your guests. Easy.
I've also noticed, and I'm not doing this because I'm interested in interacting with the what did you call him? The withering something hand?
The what?
You called Karen something like the withering something or other hand of the haunted hand house or something?
Haunted ham volcano.
Right. I'm not really interested in interacting with him at all. And with all honesty, I mean, he provides us lovely content, but that's because one of our jobs here is to commentate on the commentators. And the biggest, dumbest commentator out there, we commentate on a lot. I mean, it's like if we were commentating on the bully at school, then you'd talk quite a lot about the bully at school. We commentate on the commentators. He's one of the biggest and dumbest and most precious and most disingenuous and most unethical. And so he features a fair bit.
Fragile, wrong
fragility
all the time. It's just a perfect storm. He's just a blowhard.
And speaking of that, Rafe Manji on tomorrow night with us. And so
that'd be good.
Yeah, remember, people, if you want to get a hold of Karen and ask him what questions he had for Rafe if he wanted him to go on the platform, you're more than welcome to do that. But see, I'm sure that we've got Rafe on because we're just woke tards, and Top is woke and we're woke, and that's the only reason that we get access to him. Which goes to make you kind of think, why did he get access to Luxon? What does that say about Luxon? If Rafe will only come on with us because we're woke and he's woke, then does that mean that Luxon will only go on with him because they're both misogynist, conspiracy theorist, right-wing lunatics? Is that a fair? If we're gonna get compared, does that mean we can compare him as well? All right.
Questions.
So Rafe on tomorrow night, and Rafe on from 9 as well, guys. So if you want to be with us, you want to ask any questions, then be here at 9. Bring a friend, as we always say. And someone, Finsag, is putting up an interesting comment there. I guess we'll leave that one there. We don't know if that's true or not. We will be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Take it easy. Have fun. Be safe. Bring a friend tomorrow night. And other than that, I will catch you all, and Chewy will catch you all in about 22 and a half hours. Take care,
We had
y'all.
69 live listeners. I want 69 likes on our video, please.
You can't say 69 tonight after we talk about
I can't because it would
sexuality.
be nice. If
No.
we got 69, yes, would be nice.
Okay. Catch you tomorrow night from 9. Hooroo team. Bye.
Not nice.